Yes, thank you very much. I will spend the next 10 seconds trying to share my screen. We've practiced it. It worked a minute ago. We'll see if it still works. Yes, I'm sharing something. Now I need to make my screen big. My presentation, voila. And I need to swap my display settings. Voila. So yes, so thank you very much also for inviting me to this webinar. It's always nice to be able to speak about the work that we do and the thoughts that we have, and in this case about sustainability, which in our mind and in my mind is an extremely important topic. I've titled my short introduction, "Measuring is Everything," and I'm hoping to make that point in the next 10 minutes or so. So I'm Eric Reinhardt. I work at Interdigital. Before that, I spent most of my time in academia as a researcher, mostly working on high dynamic range imaging. I've recently discovered that high dynamic range imaging actually has an impact on the environment, and so I want to spend the rest of my career undoing that impact that I'm having by the work that I've done in the past. So we're looking at Interdigital at how we can reduce the energy footprint in the technologies that we work on, and that's largely communication and video, and so broadcasting is part of this. And so in my work, started to look at what's happening and where can we improve. And the first thing that we discovered was that actually we don't even know how much we're using, and so that's, you know, in a very nutshell, why we take this angle about measuring. So the broadcast landscape, the technologies for production, for distribution, and for home viewing, when I started looking at this, it looked a bit like this. And the more I look at it, the more I've realized that this is in fact also how everything is connected together. It's a big mess, and it's heterogeneous, and everything that you see in here is used in a broadcast in some way or another, more or less, dependent on where you are, who you are, how you take your viewing in, and we simply don't know how much energy that takes globally. There are a few things that we know, and I will tell you about that. We know that the energy that's produced costs some amount of CO2 equivalent, and that depends on what country you're in. If you're in the UK, that's I've looked that up. It's 0.28 kilograms CO2 per kilowatt hour. Globally, we used about 23,000 terawatt hours in 2019. The peak of that was reached in 2010, and some percentage of this is used in information technology and computing. We don't know exactly what that percentage is. The estimates range from about 4% now to 10%. I'm fairly sure it's not 10%, but it may be more than 4%. And of course, 4% or 10% of 23,000 terawatt hour is still an enormous amount. Now the video is taking a percentage of those 4 to 10%, and it's a shockingly high percentage. Of all the internet communication, it's believed that about 70 to 80%. So if you're going to reduce the impact that the internet has, starting with video is not a bad place. So that's why we're here. If you look at broadcast, you can petition the energy use in about 3 stages. The first is production, second is distribution, and then the third is consumption in the home. Production costs a very rough 12 and 30 of the emissions generated in broadcasting. Very large estimates there. Distribution depends on how you distribute, whether it's cable, satellite, streaming, or digital terrestrial broadcasting. In fact, digital terrestrial transmissions are the cheapest, with about 0.07 kilowatt hour of energy used per device hour. For the rest, in 2016 at least, it was about 0.17 to 0.18 kilowatt hours per device hour, so higher. This may have changed. Since 2016, a lot has changed in terms of streaming, in terms of which is used a lot more now, and these figures will have changed. We don't know where they are today. And I'll mention one more number, and that's the internet intensity. That's an important number because it tells you how much energy it takes to communicate a certain amount of data. So it's measured in kilowatt hours per gigabyte. And here the estimates vary absolutely enormously, between 0.0064 kilowatt hours per gigabyte, so very cheap, to 136 kilowatt hours per gigabyte. Now, both ends of this scale are unrealistic. A good estimate is 0.06 kilowatt hours per gigabyte, but that changes over time. It's halving every 2 years apparently, and so that leaves me with about five observations. There are not that many studies on how much energy is used in broadcasting or in video or in internet communication. There are very large uncertainties in everything that's being measured. The use changes over time. The user behaviors change over time. And then we have potentially a very large impact of the pandemic. And so with that, today, I cannot tell you how much energy we use. I cannot tell you where we should start optimizing. And so that brings me to my last point, and that is that really what we should be doing is first build an infrastructure that allows us to measure how much transmitting of video costs. I think the most straightforward way to do this is to agree on some standardization scheme of metadata, metadata that allows us to tag the cost of each individual player that is passed on the way from the broadcaster to the end user's home. With that, we have a technology to measure. We have a metric to measure, and that allows us to measure how much. Without measuring, we also don't know how much we're improving. So that's my main point for today. Thank you for listening. I will stop sharing my screen and hand over to the chairman of this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. And so I guess so initially we've looked at kind of the science, and we realised that we in order to understand how we're improving the technology deployments and the practice in the industry, we need to measure it. So thank you very much, Eric. Next, I'd like to invite Mikkel from Atom to talk a little bit about the technology and the efforts they're making to improve energy efficiency and the general green credentials of our industry. Mikkel.
Thank you. So I will start to share my screen as well. So I will share what we are doing at ATEM. So we'll put full screen. So ATEM is working on different areas. So I put this slide to explain what we are doing at ATEM. We started from hardware, from contribution. Then we moved to software with the distribution. And now we are having our new suite of product that is NIA, that is working on the let's say the last mile, the CDN and the OTT delivery. It's quite important for us also to reduce this particular end. So we are starting from the contribution. At the moment, there are multiple encodings that are done from contribution to primary distribution and redistribution. So if we could at least reduce this, that could also be something that be of interest for our customer. You all know that there are let's say people looking at video from a linear point of view or the view, and then you have many ways to distribute the content. And that's something that is also happening. Is there really a need for, let's say, for higher resolution? That's still something that we need to look at. Or is that what we have today is sufficient enough? So that's also another angle that we can take. So looking at SD to 8K, starting from 1993 to 2020, we are looking at quite a bunch of jump on resolutions that are quite important. And in the meantime, we have some new codecs that are arriving that are reducing by 2 the bandwidth requested by each of the new resolution that we are looking at. So that's a way of looking at how to reduce our impact. Increase the resolution, that's something that we should look at in the future, or if that what we are having today is sufficient for a high quality of video. So I put this one just because there is also some effort ongoing. So I put first, if we can have a single encoder looking at broadcast and broadband, it will simplify the workflow. Here, CMAF is media application format that has been standardized inside MPEG, that is looking at distributing OTT in a single format for both Android devices and Apple devices. So this is an important technology that can reduce also the burden on the CDN. And there is a current activity where we can use this particular format, that is CMAF, to broadcast it. So we use multicast ABR for that. And at the moment, there are activities at DVB to enable that on DTG. And this is also the technology that can be used for 5G broadcast or 5G multicast in the end. And at DVB, they are also working on DVB-I, so a single client that is capable of handling both unicast and multicast. So I put this one as well because this is an ongoing work that we are doing. Something that is proposed to DVB at the moment. That is the new codec coming from MPEG, versatile video coding, and it has been also proposed to DVB and TV3.0. TV3.0 is the standard in Brazil. That is an ongoing standard, and at the moment, this is the technology that the most promising technology they are looking at. They want to broadcast 8K, so it's a bit challenging. And at the moment, that can be the only technology. They want also to use both at DVB and TV3.0 to broadcast or multicast CMAF, so to have a single format for delivering to OTT client. So we hope to reduce this burden on the end-to-end ecosystem. So we did some analysis on our side. So the idea was to look at what we can achieve today. So we use a single plat to see from a platform from 2018 and the platform from 2020, 21, sorry, what we can achieve today compared to what we were able to achieve in 2018. So with the let's say the algorithm that we put in place, the new technology for the encoding, the new platform as well. We benefit from to see how we benefit from it and to reduce our footprint in the end. Then we look at the storage and the delivery using the new technology that we can use as well, trying to also check on the DVR part what we have to record, what will be the benefit of the technology that we can put in place. And we look into the CDN and as well how to reduce the impact on the CDN by reducing the storage. And we look also at the satellite transmission, mainly with new codecs, on how to reduce our impact on the satellite to have more services in the end. So that's all to me. I have to stop sharing twice. You're on mute, Richard.
Someone had to do it. Sorry about that. Right, so we've heard a little bit about the science, a little bit about technology. Next, I'm going to ask Ian from Blackbird to talk about the practice and why video shouldn't cost the earth, and particularly introduce their Green Elements report on sustainability and the challenges facing TV and video production. So Ian, over to you.
Thanks, Richard. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. I'll see if I can share my screen. Hold on. Probably not. Okay, let's leave that. It's just a picture of the front of our report, as you say, Richard, called Video Shouldn't Cost the Earth. We produced this report early in the spring with Green Element because, as Eric correctly points out, there isn't a great deal of data. There isn't a great deal of measurement in the industry to show the impact that the production side of the industry is having. Eric's quote of between 12 and 25% of the pollution is coming from the production side is helpful to know. But we started to look in more depth about what was creating that. I mean, just to take a step backwards, first of all, the International Energy Agency this morning said that they want to get to 2050 with net zero. In order to do that, it's going to require a hell of a lot more renewable energy. There isn't that energy today that exists, and that has to be ramped up quickly. In order to reach net zero the quickest, it's not just about bringing in renewables; it's also about reducing the carbon that's being created, and that's where Blackbird, our technology, fits in. So, similar to what Mikhail said, we've been working on a cloud-native system that is also builds around our own codec. It's not a distribution codec; it's an editing codec, and it allows for content to be manipulated, edited, and produced natively within the cloud. So that's just a bit of background there. What the report concluded was that there are a number of technologies that exist today that, if they're ramped up considerably, could have an immediate and beneficial impact and large-scale impact on carbon reduction. If the technologies that are most widely used today are continue to be used, then I'll give you some examples of what that means. For on-premise systems in the video editing space, there's a huge amount of pollution that's caused from buildings, from on-site equipment, from transport, from data centers, from internet infrastructure, and from the power required to move content, high bitrate content around the internet. That is causing an awful lot of pollution. If you take that from an on-premise system into a cloud-based system, a lot of that, a portion of that carbon is saved. However, quite a large portion of it is still used up in moving high bitrate content around and in the data center side of things. If you move to a cloud-native system, then the cloud-native system versus the on-premise system is around 91% more carbon efficient. If you look at the cloud-native versus the cloud-based, the lift and shift system, it's still in the high 80s more carbon efficient than a cloud-based system. So in practice, what we're trying to explain to the industry is that it's not just about moving to the cloud. It's not just about lifting and shifting existing design into the cloud. What it's about is a full redesign of how media workflows should work in order to be and take best advantage of the cloud and be most carbon efficient. So what we came up with was 3 T's really that we want the industry to adopt. The 3 T's are that the industry should leverage existing technology as widely as it can. And the international agency this morning, Energy Agency, said immediate and massive deployments of all available and efficient energy solutions. We would absolutely support that. But what we also need to do as an industry is start to leverage the talents that we have in the industry to make more technology, to make more efficiencies in production. And I think what Eric is coming up with in terms of measurement and in terms of technology is absolutely very, very welcome. And thirdly, it's really for us, it's about targets. It's about making commitment to this, making it a top priority of all media production companies or media broadcasters in order to try and meet targets and not just think about when they start off a production that it's all about profit. I mean, you know, it is hard to make a profit sometimes in the media industry, I appreciate. But if everybody is working to these targets, then it is a level playing field. And that's what we would really want the industry to take on. So, yeah, that's my little intro.
Thank you, Ian. That's very helpful. And I guess we begin to get to the point where we truly understand our system characteristics, so that we can then move forward. Coming back to Eric's point at the beginning, from an end-to-end chain perspective, Ian, Ian, Mikhail, and Eric, where do you think the main opportunity for improvement is, or is it across the chain and seeing it as a holistic operation? Ian, maybe.
I think there's some low-hanging fruit. I do. If you look at our particular part of the industry, again, we'll quote that 25% number of the industry is production. I can really only influence production because that's what we're a production tool. Then I think it's, you know, there's some low-hanging fruit around transport. You know, as we go into a post-COVID world where remote production is now much more trusted, much more you know, people experience it because they have had to over the last 12 to 18 months. Then I think that we really should promote that any kind of production needs to think about remote first. And if you can do remote efficiently, then the whole transport side of it is taken away. Your jumbo jets going down to Rio, or your jumbo jets going to Japan, etc., full of editors and content creation people. If you can create hubs within those events that are taking place, where production teams can remotely log into that hub and create content for, you know, for their own markets, and that's a big win. It's a low-hanging fruit, at least. I think other areas are, you know, using, as Mikhail said, a much more efficient codec, either in the distribution or indeed in the content creation in the first place. Again, it is usually technology that is either exists today or is well advanced to exist. That can be real low-hanging fruit. There are more difficult things, of course. I mean, you know, not everything can be done today, and that's why we say that we should really start to think about leveraging talent as well to develop more carbon efficient technologies in the future.
Thank you. And Mikhail, from your perspective.
So as I was saying, the main issue is also the consumption. What do we need to do? What do we really request in the end? So there was a big trend to all have it in HDR, to also increase the resolution. So starting from UHD, let's say 3 to 4 years ago, moving to 8K last year, finally, not really in the end because of the situation of the COVID, really increasing the resolution anymore. We are more looking at whether we need to consume the video in a more carbon-friendly world where we can see the impact on what we are doing. So we have there is a customer in France that is Canal Plus that is using his own services at the moment and reducing the video quality, or taking account for that you can have the choice in between having the highest quality of experience with the highest quality video, or you can have a lower quality, but you reduce your impact in terms of carbon use. I don't know what's the result of their study in the end, but they let the consumer, let's say, taking this particular choice, and that's something that, yeah, at least they let people choosing by themselves what they prefer to do and what will be their impact, and probably they will take some decision out of this at some point.
Thank you. We've got a question that's come in. It's great to see the carbon energy saving opportunities at VVC in distribution, but do you have any sense of what the environmental impact would be from decoding in the consumer devices? With millions of devices accessing content, could savings potentially be outweighed by increases in decoder energy? Also, has any consideration been made on the material side of making devices VVC compliant? Michael, are you best placed to answer that?
So I can start the answer. So when they start to do the standardization effort at MPEG, they are looking at the impact on the decoder. So when they do something at MPEG, they look at the memory consumption, they look at the power consumption of the decoder, and it has to be twice complex than the current decoder that is in place, that is HEVC for their concern. So that's quite important. On the head-end side, they are looking at an encoder that is no more than 10 times the complexity of the current encoder. So 10 is a lot, but in the end, if you have a single encoder for many viewers, you are not really, that's not where the power consumption is coming from, because you have many viewers in the end, so you are reducing a lot on the CDN. And that's true that you need new equipment for that, so that will start to have also an impact on that, because you need those particular new equipments that support VVC, and that's something that at the moment is not a, but as soon as we have then we will reduce the impact on the video itself.
Thank you. Eric, from your perspective, I mean, one of the key things that appears logical is to make sure we move the overall market, the end-to-end chain, and we prepare the market incredibly well for the future, as we did with the transfer from analog to digital. We should now be preparing the overall market right the way through from acquisition, post-production, and distribution. Do you see any tools available, or should we be introducing tools to measure across the overall chain?
Well, yeah, so my thinking is really centered around metadata at this point, because everyone is along the chain of distribution, production, distribution, consumption, is contributing a bit to the cost of a video, and that bit changes all the time, and we don't know what it is. So if you can insert some metadata at the start to account for the production cost, and then at the CDNs of this world and infrastructures that you have, that metadata is extended, so that once the data arrives at the consumer, we know where the energy has been spent, and that way at least the consumer knows. If you can then also send it back to those who use the energy, then we know. What I do know is, well, I know a little bit more than I led on to in my introduction. We do know that a lot of the energy is still used in the end user's home. Certainly, if you look at digital terrestrial broadcasting systems, it's the television that actually uses the most energy, and it's the production of light in those devices that's most costly. And a good second are set-top boxes. They also use more than they should, I suspect. Of course, that's changing when streaming is becoming more popular. There all the network equipment on and off premises is more expensive, and especially there the picture is quite blurry for me. Hence, measurements necessary.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to come back to the stuff in the home in a minute, actually, because I think that's quite an important thing for us to talk about and how we migrate and change that. Ian, from your perspective, it feels that it's right to get it efficient from the start, and if we're getting efficiencies into the beginning of the chain, surely they can flow through and help overall. How do we encourage the industry to move to native cloud production techniques?
Well, that's what my job is. Yeah. I've tried various techniques, Richard, and I'm still working on it. But yeah, no, we released this report recently, and that's gone down really well. I have to say, it's been well received, and we've had everyone. Well, I won't name names because that's probably, don't want to say who didn't respond. But there's some of the biggest names in the industry have got back in touch with us, and actually Devoncroft themselves put it up as a standard in their keynote a couple weeks ago to say that the industry really should have a look at this. So there's that, but I think we also have to persuade them that actually just because you're green does not mean that you are not efficient in other ways, that you are still very, very high quality, that you're still very cost effective, that your user experience is very high, and that content can be turned around in high quality at speed, etc., etc. So all of those aspects we put together as a package for the users, because we want, it's not just about the stick, it also has to be about the carrot, and make sure that the industry know that just by going to a more carbon efficient solution does not impair the quality. In fact, in most ways, Blackbird will absolutely enhance that. So that's a way that we talk about it. It's a full package. And they can save an awful lot of upfront costs as well as make sure that they have a good conscience about the whole thing. I think the other thing is, though, that as people move towards net carbon, this can be achieved in a number of ways. It can be, as I said at the start, it can be achieved by reducing carbon emissions. It can also be using renewables. Of course, there aren't enough renewables, but it can also be about buying offsets. Now, offsets are really expensive, and it's been shown that 73% of offsets don't actually even work. And so just by persuading them that offsets won't work, and also they're very expensive, then I think the accountants and the money men in these big operations will listen and understand that they can come in line.
I guess from you mentioned the business benefits to this, and the benefits of kind of streamlining and efficiencies. I guess the other side are the spectrum benefits and the bandwidth benefits. And Michael, from a spectrum scarce, we know that we're moving to an all 5G world, but also probably a hybrid situation of broadcast, fixed and wireless in the future, leading to an all IP world. How do we see this helping the spectrum challenge or the broadband capacity issues, Michael?
So there are some technologies that they are looking at in 5G. So MBMS is one of them, where you can enable multicast over a 5G network. So it's quite important, and they rely on the mobile in the end, where the mobile is OTT today. So they do unicast, but with that capacity to receive multicast, then you can receive on a mobile network also multicast or broadcast. There is also there is an activity in 5G Mag where they want to combine broadcast together with a mobile network. So typical broadcast network with a mobile network, and this is also ongoing to convergence in between, let's say, broadcast and unicast. So there are a lot of activities at the moment trying to converge about. So at first, OTT is the best solution, but they want also to reduce their impact and to use multicast when they can, especially when there are a big number of viewers on the unicast stream and they have to switch to multicast. And since everybody is willing to content at the same time, looking at lowering the latency and to have something where they are all in sync. So multicast is one solution also to have all in sync in the end. So reducing at the same time the carbon footprint, but having a single workflow for many users.
Excellent. A question that's come in is, can the panelists see a point in time when consumers will be given an eco-friendly option when they choose content on streaming platforms? This is something that came out from our State of the Nation report, and it seems you don't necessarily want the eco option that is reduces your enjoyment of the great pictures, but actually selecting an option that means that you are receiving your content in an eco-friendly way seems sensible. I don't know if Ian, do you have any comments on that?
Well, yeah, it works in the travel industry. I think there's the potential for it to work maybe in a slightly different way in TV. It'd be nice to have those big public clouds and the data centers that exist around those being much more carbon efficient. I think that there's every effort being made to make that happen. But I think it's a way to entice those big groups to move faster. Maybe, I think we talked about carrot and stick earlier. It's if the consumer starts to choose, then maybe there's better leverage for groups such as ours to move the pace along a little bit faster. I think that would be a good thing. I think it's sometimes I could. There are the travel industry and the media industries are slightly different. There are lots of planes going to certain places, obviously, and you can choose the greener one. Wouldn't quite be the same for television, but I'm sure there's a way that we can work it in.
It may be somehow similar though, because a shorter flight is better than a longer flight, and my feeling is that a lot of the data is going to be cached somewhere along the way. It already is in CDN, so a video stream that is cached closer to the user will be less costly than something that comes from further away.
I think in our next session at 2 o'clock, we're gonna talk about choosing the sustainable option, the consumer dilemma. So we're definitely going to explore this further. But I guess, Eric, from your perspective, in order to be able to provide those choices to consumers, we're going to have to be able to tell them what the best option is, and what are the barriers to us getting whether it's metadata attached to it or a true understanding of where the option the best options are.
I think the biggest barrier is going to be politics, to be honest. I think we need to convince the CDNs to give us up some of their proprietary information and attach it to the video streams as metadata. I don't think they want to tell us how much they're using at the moment. There's a second issue that popped into my head. It's something called Jevons paradox. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. So this is Jevon was a coal miner in 1865, and he's found that many industries were improving the efficiency of their use of coal, and they found that when the cost goes down, people use more of it. And there's a certain risk that if our bandwidth it's less expensive to use the bandwidth that we have, we'll use more of it. That also requires a political solution, I think.
Cheap gasoline in the States. It meant that no one walks anywhere in LA. Another question that's come in: how will wireless distribution technology such as 5G impact the carbon footprint versus more traditional delivery systems? I guess by that they probably mean broadcast. But do we think the move to 5G is gonna help or hinder our aims and objectives in carbon neutrality? If anyone's got a view on that, Mikel,
So as I was saying, there is a big trend today to merge all the medium to a single medium. If that's the case, help. If we have the heterogeneity, then it will be hard to convince people to move to a single technology. So it depends on how, and that's the same that what Eric was saying. It's more political answer than I cannot push everybody to use 5G from everywhere. That will be hard for me to do that as a single company. But if we want to use a particular solving issue, and if it is a converging solution, then it should help. But that's hard. It's still fragmented in the end, so it will be hard to have the final answer to that. But it will help definitely.
Yeah, that's very useful, actually. I think also we should, our sponsor today is Fastly, and we should definitely talk to Fastly about how we can work with the CDNs to make sure that we get good data to drive efficiencies across the chain. One of the things from our perspective, and we're working very closely with Ofcom as a regulator and DCMS as the government department, on how we can best plan for the future, and I think it's very important that we do this in an ordered and structured way. And Ian, you mentioned kind of low-hanging fruit. I think it's worth us having a little bit of a chat about that, but also ensuring that if we're, I think, at a reasonable inflection point for our industry for planning for the future, as you know, planning kind of 10 years out into the 2030s, we should make sure that we factor not just not leaving anyone behind and making sure that everyone continues to get great television, but also do this in a way that's completely sustainable. To come back to the low-hanging fruit, Ian, how do we mobilize some things very quickly so that we've got a good news story for our viewers?
I think you have to look there at the Pareto law. It's like it's a large amount of the damage is being done by a very small number of the of the people now in terms of the size. We see the consolidation happening in the streaming world. We see these juggernauts, as they've been called over the last couple of days, that are being put together. I think really, if you can convince either by carrot or stick or both, these big operations to come in line and hit sustainability targets in terms of production and in terms of distribution, it really makes a big impact very, very quickly. I think that's where simplistically I would say that, but these platforms are indeed getting bigger, and therefore the number of people that are deciding on the decisions is getting smaller.
I'm not sure our newly founded digital markets unit quite has sustainability at its core, but maybe it's something we should put on their agenda. Actually, I think there is an opportunity to join the dots between amazing improvements in the experience, huge business benefits, and do it all in a sustainable way. And I think that's something that we'll return to over time. One of the questions coming is, how do we come together as an industry to get better data on environmental impact? On the environmental impact from CDN providers, network operators, and cloud providers. Would anyone like to take a view on that? Michael, possibly?
Yeah, there is one way, at least we have a lot of analytics that we can grab already. So there are ways to compute some data from the on how much cache you need to use, how much codec you need also to use, because that will impact in the end the number of viewers that you can reach. So that's data that we can work on, and then we can have a metric at least on this one. So on this aspect, we should be able to have a kind of metric. We need to know more about the hardware itself, but at least on the data itself, we have a lot of data that we compute, and we can get them out of the analytics that are already in place today.
So a lot of the data is there. We just need to mine the data, I guess, and make sure that we make that available to viewers in a way that they understand. And Eric, from your perspective, are there simple viewer metrics that you think we could easily produce from the systems today, or do we need to take a leap of faith into the metadata world in order to do that?
I'm not suggesting that metadata is the only way to get a better picture. It's the one that I've come up with in my in my own corner. I think people stupid simple things that people should switch off their equipment when they're not using it. But one thing that I found a little bit shocking is when I looked at that diagram of all the equipment that is being used in the distribution, it seems that there's actually quite a lot of equipment floating around in people's homes. There's set-top boxes, video recording equipment, computers, phones, laptops, televisions, ADSLs, Wi-Fi, routers. It doesn't stop, and all that equipment has a production cost. All that equipment is using some energy when it's being used, and it's even using some energy when it's not used. Switching it off would make already quite a big difference.
It's design, right? It's design that exists today that could easily be applied to that kind of equipment. It's the same in the production process. It's like, we are, we're seeing with these big lift and shift editing systems, for instance, and playout systems, that they're just moving because they can, and because power is not that expensive. They're just moving massive amounts of high bit rate content from A to B, from B to A, and back again several times around, when it doesn't need to happen. It's just about rethinking the design with technology that already exists, and being more conscious of it. And I think it's celebrating the wins that you get from it. I mean, you said about low-hanging fruit and easy wins. It's not the sexiest of subjects. People aren't at the moment saying, oh, they've got the greenest workflow, they've got the most efficient design, and perhaps that's what we should be doing. We should be saying, this is, we should celebrate when this happens. At the moment, it's still too much of an afterthought. It's not as much understood as it should be. It's still too much of an afterthought. It's just starting to happen now, but let's think about ways we can celebrate our victories here.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, actually. We had one comment come in, actually. How many USB chargers do we all have plugged in as we speak at home? And I think it's probably a horror story, actually. Anecdotally, we just recently moved to a wonderful mesh Wi-Fi system in our home, which is great. Each one of those mesh devices that you could fry an egg on all day. So I think, we definitely need to take a holistic view of this. If you don't mind, I'll kind of come back to the where do we stimulate the change? So we mentioned there's some low-hanging fruit, and there are also some big strategic decisions that we can make, and probably have a duty of care as individuals, companies, industry generally, and the regulator and government. Question to the three of you, actually. Where do you think we can make the biggest influence that will create the impact?
In pockets.
In pockets.
But I think carbon is a scarce resource, and you need to when resources are scarce, effectively creating these emissions is not something we can do forever. Then you need to make sure that people understand that it's a costly exercise, and therefore you need to, dare I say, start thinking about charging for that in a more structured way. That makes people think.
Yeah, and that feels like the kind of thing that government could look at, and I think we can take that forward. Mikkel?
Yeah, that's probably how we can force people to look at their impact. I also think that what my canal is doing with their Canal Plus, with their testing at the moment, is also a way to see whether people are conscious about what they are looking at the moment, and if they really want something less carbon used than what they are doing at the moment. Is that something that they are really keen of, or not? That's something that we should look at. Netflix is also doing something similar at the moment. So there are a lot of people looking into it, and they reduce also the bandwidth at some point during the first week of the COVID situation. So and I don't think people were complaining; they were still looking at video. There are many ways of doing that, and probably either the money is the most impact way to do that, to charge people, or also to let people having some influence about what we are delivering to them. And that's another way of thinking of it.
Excellent. And Eric?
Yes, I agree with that. The general public needs to be educated on what their impact is, and that may drive changes in behavior.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity.
At the moment, the cost of watching television, the consumer is not feeling it in his pocket.
Yeah, and I think there are huge business benefits, huge viewer benefits, and marketing opportunities here, which I guess are reasonably untapped as yet by the video industry. And I think that's something we should look at going ahead. I guess the good news is TV so often is a group experience. It's a bit like sharing the bathwater. So I guess in many ways we should add up the benefits of also the community viewing of television. I think is a great thing. And we have a long history of preparing for the future and making sure that not only do we not leave anyone behind as we move to new technologies with television and we look after the vulnerable in society, but also we make sure that we do it in a way that joins the dots on other benefits. And I think there are big business benefits. I think there are very significant marketing benefits and of course benefits to the planet. I'll say To The Nation report showed that viewers are willing to pay for greener streaming, with almost half of respondents saying they would pay at least £1 a month, and that's around 400 million per annum as an opportunity. Do you think that's something that we could tap into as an industry, Ian?
Yeah, I do absolutely. I think that's something that we look at some of the, when we talk about the 80-20 rule and low-hanging fruit, some of the companies that could have the biggest impact on this are the big public clouds. And currently, if you look at how the incentives are built around how their salespeople get paid, etc., it is around the more power, the more bandwidth, the more storage they sell, then the bigger their bonuses are. If it was switched around to the more efficient the power, the more efficient the technology, and the more efficient the storage, there may be even there. There's, again, it's a very few number of people in the grand scheme of things. Then there's an impact there. And if it can be shown that this is something that the viewers want overall, and that they're actually willing to pay more for that kind of level of innovation into technology to make it more efficient, then I think it's good. I mean, selling something, selling power, bandwidth, and storage is generally going to be pretty commoditized anyway. So you'd think that moving towards selling technology and selling efficiency would be appealing.
Yeah, and I think there needs to be a change in the way we think about it, because you're right, there's a kind of a moral hazard in the industry to increase bandwidths, increase resolution, increase the brightness of televisions, etc., so that we get a wonderful experience, and that all helps drive revenues across the industry. I think it's probably time for a change of how we see those things and incentivize ourselves to make those improvements. We're beginning to come to the end of the session now, so just before we finish, maybe I can ask Michael, Eric, and Ian just to give your kind of elevator pitch for what you think we should do next to drive our industry hard in the direction of sustainability.
I can start.
Yeah.
So my view is really on the delivery. So because this is where I am working, so is to reduce the impact on the delivery as much as possible. So the CDN, the just-in-time packager, and the encoding part must have a big impact in the end. And then let's say the medium that we use, if it can be a 5G everywhere, if it is fiber, to have a common delivery mechanism, whatever we use as a medium. And then the impact on the receiver side, I would say, I hope that we could have some impact on the receiver side in the end. But that's purely a hope on my side. And I agree that the cloud looks infinite. So if it looks infinite, that's not good also in the end. So about having more than what we are having right now. And yes. think about.
Thank you, Mikhail.
Infinite is too much to everybody.
And beyond. Eric.
I think all the key actors in the area should come together. I think standardization is going to play a key role in this. We need standards to be able to govern this. I reckon there's a role for politics, and all of that needs to come together in a sensible way to drive this. I think there's a role to educate the end users as well. Use whatever they have in their home sensibly, and if we can show them what programs use what kind of energy, then that could be a factor in their decisions. At the moment, they have no way of knowing.
You can imagine a digital on-screen graphic telling you how much you're destroying the planet as you watch Netflix. Ian.
Yeah, well, a lot of this, just like being said by Mikhail and Eric about education, absolutely agree. We should educate the viewer, and we do educate the broadcasting companies, the data centers, all those guys along the whole supply chain need to be educated. And I think we can do that through those 3 T's that I mentioned. We should make sure that they're educated to leverage existing technology, that we celebrate victories on new technology and innovation through leveraging talent, and that we really set targets. And people start off with a level playing field and say, right, we need to hit these targets before we start, and then everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet. So yeah.
Ian, you've done a great job of summing up for me there. I couldn't have put that better myself. Thank you so much, Mikhail, Eric, and Ian, for a very insightful discussion. Hopefully you've all enjoyed it. We will make sure that we take these points forward. In particular, I think I've got 2 action points. One is to talk to our sponsor, who we're incredibly grateful for sponsoring the session, Fastly, about how we can work with CDNs and improve efficiency and data and find out what we're doing. Also, I think it's time we moved sustainability up the agenda of DCMS and the Digital Markets Unit, particularly as we plan towards a future what is likely to be all IP. And we're doing a lot of work to prepare that the future so that no one gets left behind. But actually, from today's session, I realised that not only do we not leave anyone behind as we move to an all IP future, but also we need to make sure that we do it in a sustainable way and join the dots on experience, business benefits, sustainability, and of course, ensuring that there's a wonderful view of experience in the future. That leads me to our next session. So our next session is at 2 p.m. today. And that session is going to look at choosing the sustainable option, the consumer dilemma. So very much builds on everything we've talked about today. And so please, thank you very much. Thank you to our sponsor, our speakers, Mikhail, Eric, and Ian, and join us for our next session at 2 p.m. today, where we'll drill down further on the consumer dilemma. Thank you.